Welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCEN certification holders, and industry professionals. Our goal is to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always worth your time.
In this podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend, Rebecca Geyer. From ICU to ED, pre-op to PACU, pediatrics to process improvement, Rebecca has kept a fresh view of nursing as she's reimagined her career over 20 years. We have plenty of conversational ground to cover in this episode called Seeing the World of Trauma Anew Each Day.
I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCEN and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dexter, Director of Professional Development at BCEN. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Holly.
Glad to have you with us. In this episode, we're joined by Rebecca Geyer. I had the pleasure of meeting Rebecca this year at the National Student Nurses Association conference, where she spoke at a tabletop session on the specialty of trauma nursing. Her passion for the subject matter inspired me, and I cannot wait to have another conversation with her. It's going to be recorded this time. So, Michael, could you please introduce us to our BCN friend, Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca brings over 2 decades of diverse nursing experience, with the majority of her career rooted in trauma ICU care. Her clinical background spans neurosurgical ICU, pediatric pre-op and PACU, the emergency department, and roles in trauma performance improvement and injury prevention. She currently serves as the director of trauma performance improvement for the Pennsylvania Trauma Systems Foundation, the accrediting body for all trauma centers across the state. In her current role, Rebecca leads statewide initiatives to advance trauma care quality and outcomes. Rebecca, welcome to the BCN and Friends podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. And I wanted to first start out with just talking a little bit about you and your nursing career, but really getting to know that in the terms of trauma nursing, because I think a lot of people in the emergency world kind of think of emergency nursing and trauma nursing as a very similar thing. But I know trauma nursing is a big topic to tackle. So what got you into the world of trauma nursing, and what makes you see that as a unique specialty within nursing care?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of us have stumbled into our professions or the later years of our professions where it's not necessarily what we picked. When I was in nursing school, I really pictured myself as a cardiac nurse. I loved the exact science of cardiac nursing. And when I first graduated, I knew I wanted to work in the ICU. And so that's where I first started. And you quickly realize that it's not just ICU nursing, but there's all these different nursing specialties and patient populations within there. And I was lucky enough to work early on in my career in a neurosurgical ICU. So saw lots of oncology patients with neurosurgical tumors, but then also a lot of trauma patients, and really fell in love with that population. You see patients on their worst day and it's completely unexpected. And then you walk with them and are involved in the care of them, getting them back out to a much better day where they can then graduate out. I think trauma nursing, though, my understanding of it has changed over the years, right? Like a trauma patient isn't just that first initial ED care of the patient. A lot of times people think that a trauma patient, or if you're a trauma nurse, it's just the ED care of the patient. And trauma nursing spans the entire spectrum from pre-hospital care through the ER resuscitation into the operating room if patients end up in the operating room, and then through the rest of their inpatient stay and out through rehab. So you can be a trauma nurse and really involved in any part of that. And I've loved that ability to then kind of bounce in between ICU and ER and see both ends of the spectrum.
Well, I know we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you work as the director of trauma performance improvement for Pennsylvania Trauma Systems Foundation. And for those that don't know what that is, we mentioned it's the accrediting body, but what's the goal of the foundation, or what is the day-to-day work that you do there now in that role?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad that you asked about that. So Pennsylvania Trauma Systems Foundation, or PTSF, we are all passionate about optimal trauma care and optimal trauma outcomes. So accreditation is one aspect of how we get to optimal trauma care. The other pillars of that would be performance improvement or process improvement, which is where I come into play. And then really all of the other spectrum of supporting our trauma registry team, supporting the administrative programs within our trauma centers. And so we come beside them to help support them as they're on site in our hospitals to provide that trauma care.
So real quick, distinguishing thing, and then I'll turn it back over to Holly.
Mhm.
Accreditation versus designation, because that often gets mixed up. Can you just explain to the listener what the difference is between accreditation and designation in trauma centers?
Yeah. So it comes down to which like credentialing body or accrediting body. So American College of Surgeons is predominantly the verification body for the United States. Each state can decide if their trauma centers will be ACS verified or if they have a different credentialing body. Often it will be through Department of Health. And so in Pennsylvania, we are a state designating our system is a state designation. So Department of Health then outsources the accrediting body part to PTSF. So ACS or PTSF or whichever accrediting body will then determine which level of criteria you meet. If you're a level 1 trauma center, you have all of the specialties, cardiac, neurosurg, face, plastics, spine. If you're one of the lower level centers, like a level 4, you don't have all of the specialty services. So you'll resuscitate patients and then transfer them out. So accreditation is involved in all of that part. Designation is really just more the designation of which level of center you are. Accreditation then looks at the level as well as are you meeting those standards to maintain that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
As someone who worked in a community level hospital, working with a trauma center, working inside of a trauma center, my understanding personally changed as I kind of changed roles and changed where I was working at. And I think from your perspective, where the role that you have now, you have a deep understanding of all of the designation, accreditation, the resource management that happens within that wheel of trauma care. And for someone who maybe is working, maybe like in a critical access hospital or one that's not necessarily associated with a trauma center as in the same system, it can be difficult to really understand what that means. If we could take a time for you to dive just a little bit deeper into that, as far as like, what is the differences in those levels of trauma center, but also the importance of kind of understanding the system as a whole, which again, it took me years to grapple with how complex that was. So I understand this is a big question, but
Yeah.
from where you're sitting, how would you kind of explain that if someone doesn't have maybe as much experience as you do or the same experiences? How would you kind of describe that system as a whole?
Sure. Yeah. So a hospital is a hospital, but they're not all the same for sure. If I can use an analogy, like many of us have kids, and so I'm gonna switch over to like the peds world just to use that as an analogy. So all hospitals can treat kids, pediatrics, but not all hospitals are a children's hospital. And so it's very similar in the trauma world where a trauma patient, whether or not you're in a car crash, you've wrecked your motorcycle, you fell, you were involved in some knife injury, gun-related injury, you can be treated at any hospital, but that's not necessarily going to then provide the best trauma care for those injuries. So just like you can treat a PEDS patient or child at any hospital, but you want them to get to the children's hospital, they're more experienced, they see them all the time, they know the nuances, they're up to date on the research. They're going to then give that optimal PEDS care. Trauma center is the same thing. They see all of the trauma patients that come in, they do it all the time. Their teams are trained and well rehearsed in all of those trauma care. They stay up to date on all of the new research and they track then their outcomes to make sure that their outcomes at that trauma center are going to be just as good, if not better, than other trauma centers across the state and across the nation. And I'm a data-driven person, and I love that trauma care is really data-driven. And so they're constantly looking at their outcomes to say, Are we resuscitating people adequately? Is there better IV fluid out there to resuscitate them better? Do we have the best outcomes for femur fractures or for gunshot wounds? Or are there better processes that we should switch to get better outcomes? And trauma care is incredibly data-driven to make sure you're always tweaking it and improving it, and you can benchmark yourself with another trauma center across the state or across the nation with that data and outcome. And I love that part. I love being involved in care that I know is the best quality care.
Rebecca, it's funny when you were talking about that just now. There's this conversation that always happens, like ER nurse versus ICU nurse, and the ICU nurse always has their lines labeled and they always have their vital signs trended. And when you're talking about following the data and looking at ways to improve on that, reminds me of an ICU type of thinking and the trending and the processes of following that. And, certainly it can happen in the emergency care as well. But when we're talking about improving data and improving care over time and looking at these processes, are there specific processes or specific examples that you've seen through the work that you've done that you've really looked at a major impact that's made either within a certain hospital system or patient population, or even more globally to a whole region or the whole state where you're working? Are there specific examples of that you have seen some really major changes and improvements in?
I have to speak to the whole debate, ICU nurse versus ER nurse. Like that is such a clash there in the hospital. I've lived on both sides of that. I started as an ICU nurse, so that was my first realm of it, and I was mind boggled, completely lost my mind if you ask, like, what time was this medication given, what IV, and ER nurses like often wouldn't know, right? Like, I don't know, I gave morphine. I don't know what time I gave it. They have a IV. I don't know what size it is. I don't know which hand it's in. And I couldn't understand that as an ICU nurse. I wanted my lines labeled. I wanted those exact time frames. And then I worked in the ER, and you very quickly understand that I gave them pain medicine. I can tell you what kind it was. I can tell you it fixed their pain. I can't tell you what time it was because you can't live in that. It doesn't make sense. And they have a peripheral IV and it works. And that's all you need to know in the ER. You don't need to know if it's the left hand or the right hand. It doesn't matter. They have an IV. I can save their life with that IV. That's all I need. So I do get that debate. I've now worked on both sides. I understand a little bit better, but you do have to live it and breathe it on both sides before you understand the importance of both mindsets. So it's funny that you brought that up. I'm sure you hear about it a lot.
I've lived both sides as well, so I totally understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Process improvement. I think often we think of it just as like another realm of quality, and it can feel like, did you check the right box? Did you document what you needed to document? It can feel like a punitive environment. I was lucky enough to be involved in some really, really great hospitals that really did performance improvement well. I didn't even know the terminology, though, honestly, when I was working at the bedside. I just remember as a new grad, as a new nurse, I would frequently say it shouldn't be this hard to provide good care to patients, right? Like if you're in the ICU and you need a replacement for a neo drip and you can't get it, it's not up from pharmacy. Like, why is it so hard to do my job? I just need the resources when I need them to be able to provide good care. And that frustration, I think, really drove me into process improvement. I worked at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, and they did process improvement just really well. And I was lucky enough to be involved in a project in which they looked at supply stocking. Such a simple thing, and I had never really thought about it, but a lot of nurses are hoarders. If you've experienced not finding the right supplies once, you can't find that thermometer. The next time you do find one, you're going to put it back in a spot where you know where it is, so you can have a backup supply, right? Like, I'm guilty of it. We've all done it. But that makes the whole process and issue more difficult when we are hoarding supplies. We hide supplies where we can find them. If you don't have the supplies that you need in your patient's room, we're going to make it work, and we're going to go and steal those supplies from the next bay down. And so their process was really looking at how do you keep ERs stocked with the supplies you need it when you need it? How do you keep a pre-op setting stocked with supplies that you need it when you need it? And they did this great process where they involved the bedside nurses and bedside techs and developed this whole, it's like called a Kanban system, which is just technical terminology for, it's like these little pool cards, and each supply drawer had a pool card. So your little gauze pads or your IV start kits, they developed then a system where once you would make it through half the supplies that were stocked in that drawer, the tech says they would grab that last supply, they would grab the card and drop it in a bin. And then another tech is just constantly going around and grabbing those cards, and they're labeled with like what item it was and what room it is that needs to be restocked. And so they would then always be restocked. The card would get pulled out when you still had like 3 or 4 of that specific supply still left in the drawer. So it was getting restocked before you ever got down to like that critical last supply item. And something small like that, like a little pool card reorienting when people are restocking equipment, like it seems like a small process, but it made it so much better to work in those departments that you had all the supplies that you needed when you needed it. I think process improvement does any project like that, right? Like from stocking your supply carts to looking at data and outcomes. I think more recently, I've been involved in some of like the larger projects where you're looking at blood product usage and how that can impact patients, whether or not they have been involved in a motor vehicle crash or they have a femur fracture, even just from a fall. And so are we giving the right blood products in the right ratios at the right time to those patients to really make sure that they have the best outcome? And what is that goal hemoglobin? I think that's changed over the years for how frequently you want to transfuse blood products or how early you transfuse blood products. So that's been pretty cool to see.
I resonated with many things that you said. Also the ICU ER debate. I was like, yep. I felt very singled out when you were talking about when you find the thermometer. I was like, dang, yeah, I've done that before. And just that level of, it's a granular frustration when you feel like I'm trying to do a good job, but I just don't have what I need to do that. And so it's like those seconds, minutes delays. At the end of a 12-hour shift, I spent like an hour and a half just looking for stuff when I could have spent an hour and a half actually either giving patient care or catching up on charting or all the other things that really are kind of like that higher level priority. So 100%, that's a great idea. That is a great plan. And I love that you were able to kind of wrap it around that whole idea of process improvement, because I think people do have that kind of, I don't want to say negative, but kind of that idea that like process improvement is really looking at what we're doing wrong and trying to make sure we don't do it wrong anymore. And it's really much more high level than that. And it doesn't have to start from like a bad place. It could start from hey, we do this well, but like, how could this be done even better? How could we improve the flow? How can we improve your satisfaction with your job by making sure you have what you need? I look at that and go, that's process improvement as well. So I think highlighting some of those ideas that, yes, when things go wrong, we need to figure out why, and we need to work on how can we do that better. But then when things are going well, or maybe it's just something that's more annoying than anything else, like how can we make your job, your work environment more cohesive for you to feel like you're able to do what you need to do? So I love the way that you kind of wrapped that concept and talked about it from a base level, but then also bringing it up even higher. We're definitely hearing a lot of changes and insight and research being done into blood product administration and what that looks like and kind of optimizing that. So it's really cool that you mentioned that as well. And I think your answer was spectacular for many reasons. And also because, gosh, we just need thermometers, guys. Like it really comes down to maybe we all need a thermometer. I don't know. Then I'd probably be borrowing somebody's because I would have set mine down.
But part of the diamond.
Yes. Start a movement. We all deserve a thermometer. Okay.
I don't think there's a solution though to pillows. Like that is my dreaded question. If a patient asks for an extra pillow, that is my dreaded question. You cannot find an extra pillow. They do not exist. I don't know where they go, but they don't exist in the hospital.
The crazy thing is, I don't know that I've ever actually seen a patient leave with a pillow. So I'm like, I'm
Right.
not sure where they're going.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. I don't know.
it's kind of like when you put two socks in the dryer. It's like if you open a
Mhm.
pillow in the emergency department, it disappears.
No, they just disappear. They get sucked into the
Yeah.
ventilation shafts or something. I don't know where they go, but
Yeah.
they don't stay there.
There's a void. I like that you brought that up too, because I feel like most people are gonna be like, they know the life.
Uh-huh.
They know. Well, I want to ask you a question because I think you kind of hinted at this at the beginning when you kind of talked about your own professional journey. But I feel like most people, when they enter the profession, just wanting to be a nurse, when you're in nursing school, you want to be a nurse and you're just trying your best to finish school, right? And
Mhm.
throughout nursing school, you're kind of introduced to some of the different specialties. I feel like a lot of nursing students that I talk to, they start thinking like, where am I going to fit in? And maybe for those who are kind of searching for their niche, so maybe they're new into their career or about to get started, or one thing I love about nursing is you can always consider a new direction, right? You can always
Yep.
pick somewhere else to kind of go point your toes towards. But what advice would you offer when people are just trying to figure out, navigate their place in nursing?
Yeah. That's a hard question. Like you want to end up where you're going to love it. I have loved my career, but as I mentioned, I didn't end up where I thought I would end up. Clinicals give you a good idea of what unit or what specialty you did enjoy more than others. And so I leaned heavily on that to help influence where I wanted to start. But I would just pay attention to like what makes it a good day, right? Like when do you go home and you're just lighting up as a person in which you can't wait to tell a story about what happened on your day? And what days like really light you up as a person are probably different. I started realizing that I was more energized, not necessarily more happy or positive, but more energized on days when I'd really taken care of those really critical, sick, crashing, high acuity patients. I was more energized on those days, even if the patient didn't have a good outcome. And for a while, I tried to like squelch that because you don't feel like you should be more energized on those days. Like it's been a negative experience for everyone involved. It was a very traumatic outcome for the patient and family, but I was more energized and I started realizing that I could thrive in those high acuity, rapid situations. And so it's like you have to pay attention to what is bringing you energy and what's bringing you light. Who are you a resource for? Are people coming to you and asking you questions for which topic? If you're not someone that wants to thrive in a high acuity coding environment, then you probably don't want to do ICU. You probably don't want to do trauma care. But if you can handle those situations and you do realize that you excel in them, I do think it's a good fit for you. It's always an option to switch, though. I think depending on your point in life, as my role has changed. When I first graduated, I was young and single, and I'm now in my 40s with two kids. And, I think what is that perfect job switches depending on what your needs are as a person. And I think you should have the courage to keep jumping based on what those needs are for you personally, whether that's a shift change or that's a different clinical specialty, just so you can go back to being a novice nurse and learning a whole new field. I think it brings us energy then when we're back in the learning environment.
Yeah, I agree. Those are some great points, Rebecca. I'm not disagreeing with one of them at all, but it was funny because when I was in nursing school, I did one rotation in the cath lab and I hated it. And I told myself I will never work here because this is the most boring place in the world. And then years later, I ended up working there and enjoyed it immensely. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes too, there's opportunities where you go and you try something and you don't like it, and you might go back and look again and say, was it the day? Was it the
Yep.
person that was taking me around the department that day? There's so many variables. So giving things a second chance sometimes works really well too.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yep. It didn't fit at the time for some reason, but it was a great fit then later. That's good. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that you did rotate through the cath lab there at some point.
Yeah, my career has taken me several places, yours has as well, and I think it's really hard to pinpoint like one specific thing that's really impacted us. But we do like to ask people all the time if there was a certain moment in your career certain patient, maybe even maybe a mentor, family member, somebody that really made an impact on you to where you can look back at your career and say, this is where I am today because of this person, or they really changed the trajectory, can't speak,
Yeah.
of what I was doing.
So the first person that comes to my mind is a nurse that I worked with in the neurosurg ICU, and she really helped me realize that you can bring your personality and you can bring humor even into an ICU where patients are really critical and there's devastating things going on all around you. And she would make jokes and really just have a good time with patients. We had a gentleman who was going through alcohol withdrawal as well as some significant head injuries. And he really just wanted a beer every single day, would just keep asking for a beer over and over. And there's been different points in time in which alcohol is given to patients in the ICU. This was not one of those times. But we did have drinks in like tall, skinny metal cans that were very similar to the look and feel of a beer can. And so she started joking around with this patient and said that she could get him one. And she called it a Boostweiser instead of a Budweiser, but he was all for it. And it really flipped. Like he was the most aggressive, grumpy, rude patient up until we started giving him these Boostweisers. It's just Boost juice with some protein in it, but changed his attitude. And I think that's eye-opening to me that like you can still bring humor, you can still stay within the realm of nursing and within what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do, but you can have some fun with it and just make it personable for the patient. I'm a big Patch Adams fan, so I like bringing humor into patient care, no matter if it's ICU or not. So,
Yeah, I think it's a very underutilized form of care
yeah,
that we can offer to people, and I think if it's done in a tactful way, it can be really impactful to patients. So thank you for sharing that. I remember when I was a new nurse within my first year of nursing, and the first time I had to go down to the pharmacy to go pick up beer for a patient, I'm like, this just doesn't seem like what nurses are supposed to be doing, but I guess it's what
right.
we do. It seems odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly parts of nursing career that you look back and you realize how small things that we do for people sometimes make a incredible difference. So, thank you for sharing, Rebecca. Holly, I will turn it back over to you.
Well, I get a chance to ask you a few rapid fire questions just so we can get to know you a little bit better as a person. So, Rebecca, what would you be doing if you were not in your current role? Like a career change, maybe something you'd wanted to try or would try if you just had to pick something wildly different.
I'm going to go with my retirement plan. I'm going to deliver flowers. I watched Bed of Roses, which was a great movie in the 80s, and you brighten up everyone's day. You just deliver flowers, whether or not it's a birthday or anniversary, or even if it's for a funeral, flowers brighten everyone's day. So I'm delivering flowers if I'm outside of healthcare. It's going to take me a long time to get there. I love what I do, so I don't want to do that anytime soon, but it's my retirement gig in the future.
I like that. What is your favorite flower to receive or give? But what's your favorite?
Anything yellow, like yellow roses are kind of classic, right? But like I love the bright sunflowers. Like they're always super fun and joyful.
I'm not gonna lie. There's a couple of different stores. I won't harp in their names on here because, well, maybe I should. So then maybe they give me a discount when I go buy my flowers from. But I do like to get, a bouquet here, there, and everywhere and kind of put together an arrangement, put them throughout my house. And it brightens your day to see something that beautiful. But that'll be fun. You let me know whenever you do retire. I'll see if I can order some flowers from Pennsylvania because the way that deliveries work these days, that's probably where I'm getting them from now anyway. So perfect. All right. I do have some categories of favorites. Let's start off with a favorite book or a quote that really inspires you.
5 Days at Memorial. If you haven't read it and you're in healthcare, that's my disclaimer. You have to be in healthcare. I unfortunately recommended it to somebody who was not in healthcare, and I think they're now scared to go to any hospital. But 5 Days at Memorial, all-time favorite book.
Yeah, I think it's important that when you're making a book recommendation that there is some asterisks sometimes by some,
Yes.
because I was telling my parents about a book that I read, and it was about like cadavers. Actually had been recommended by another podcast guest. And I was like, oh, it was really, and their faces as I'm telling them about like, oh, it just talks about bodies get traveled all, and they were just like, they were appalled. And I was like, maybe I should have gone with like my regular like mystery book as opposed to, oh, what do you read right now? So I 100% agree with you. It's a great book, great recommendation. But yes, asterisks by the audience. Okay. Favorite movie, TV show, or a binge-worthy series? Because, we're always looking for that next thing to watch.
Favorite movie is Patch Adams, which I mentioned briefly. My series that I'm binging right now, I'm kind of stuck on the healthcare realm, so I'm watching The Resident. All healthcare shows you kind of have to watch them and just turn off all parts of your clinical brain. I feel like The Resident brings in more of like the moral, ethical side of healthcare that not all of the healthcare series do. So I've enjoyed that one lately.
Awesome. Yes. I like Patch Adams still, if ever I see it on, or just when I feel like I need a little Robin Williams in my life. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so my husband has almost blanketly refused to watch medical shows with me because I can't turn that part. Like it's so hard to turn it off. And he'll be into it. And he's like, this is the best show. And I'll be like, okay, we'll watch it together. And then we watch it together. And the whole time I'm like, that's not real. That wouldn't have happened.
Yes.
And he's like, you've just broken this show for me. So we don't watch as many medical ones. Yeah. Or he watches them alone and he just like tells me about them. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like I like his summaries probably more than
Then you don't see when the patient's speaking while they're intubated or IV tubing is hooked up to oxygen tubing or they should just hire us just to like 5-minute consultants. We'll tell you what you got wrong. You can switch it.
Well, you can tell when they're spending money on actual medical people to critique what they're doing. And when they're just like, this person who once went to a class somewhere, they were a patient at one point in their life, and they're just gonna like, you can tell kind of the level of expertise of who's helping out on these shows by some of the insane medical device usage that happens. So, all right, great. This is a good one. Do you have a self-care go-to or a way that helps you reset? So when you've had like just a tough day, tough shift, tough week, and you just kind of need to reset, what do you do?
Yeah, I've become a cyclist. So I go for a long bike ride. I mean, even now, like with like the clip-in shoes, you like clip into the pedals and go for a couple hour ride. That just really helps me just disconnect, reset, get away from kids, from life, from however the day was at work. So,
okay. When you say you go for a ride, like what are we talking here? Like miles? How many miles?
If she says clip in, it's miles.
No, clip in immediately let me know that like we're not going for a 2-mile stroll. So what are we talking here?
30 on average. Gone farther, gone less, but 30 on average. That's like a couple hours. Yeah.
Bikes up to Buffalo and back down again.
Apparently. I don't really know how big the state of Pennsylvania is, but it sounds like you're just doing laps around it. That's what it sounds like to me. So yeah, you and your bike and your clip-ins. I mean, I knew it was serious when you mentioned that. So, but hey,
I've had some terrible wrecks being clipped in, but it's still worth it. It is still worth it.
You know what? I feel like I would be hard pressed to find someone who has clip-ins that has not had some type of incident. Maybe they just got them and they haven't, but I feel like that's kind of like a resounding theme. Yep. Once you level up to that, there's going to be one turn that twists too much and you're going to, so We'll be definitely hoping against that for you in your upcoming rides.
I think it's part of the learning curve. When you first start with a clip-in, you have to wreck once really bad to then solidify it in your brain that you do have to unclip before you stop.
This is a PSA for anybody thinking about
All about
leveling
injury
up.
prevention.
Yes.
Just saying,
Yes.
unclip before you stop.
She's doing her
Right.
trauma injury prevention spiel right here, right now, for all of you cyclists out there. So, well, Rebecca, if our audience wanted to follow you online, what social media platforms are you on, or where could they follow you at?
Yeah, I think I'm on a lot of the major ones. I'm on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram. Follow me on either of those.
Perfect. Well, I will get those listed on the blog for this episode. Thanks for sharing them.
Sounds great.
It's great chatting with you today, Rebecca. It's been really nice getting to know you, and our paths have crossed a few times over the years, but I've never had a chance to just sit down and chat with you. So it's been really good to know more about your passion for nursing and your career and some of the tips you provided and the information. It was really nice getting to visit with you today. So thank you for taking the time with us.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was great to spend the day with you guys too.
Well, I want to take this time to thank Rebecca for joining us for this episode of BCEN and Friends. Rebecca, your ability to translate complexities of trauma care, the standards, system-wide, statewide initiatives, it's truly a gift to the profession of nursing. Your passion for ensuring patients receive the best care possible, often on the worst day of their lives, is both inspiring and deeply appreciated. We're looking forward to seeing you in person at Destin Learn Live this October 13th through the 15th of 2025. Rebecca will be presenting there, and we are grateful for all that you're doing to advance and shape the future of trauma nursing. And to all our listeners, stay tuned as we bring new, insightful episodes of BCEN and Friends. If you have a suggestion for an episode, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us a message to bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs here with Michael Dexter, and on behalf of the entire BCEN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you're doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, we are out.